episode is brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/Bigfoot Hotspot for your first free downloadable book and a 30-day trial.
Not a whole lot in the Bigfoot world that we're interested in anyway right now, just getting our own stuff together and plugging away as usual.
Yeah, we got some big things coming up in the works. Hoping one of these frying pans overboils, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people on Facebook were saying that they're interested in the show, been waiting for us to do a show like this. And these guests are hard to come by, the ones that actually have shot one. A lot of times it's tough to get those guys to talk about it.
Yeah, most people won't. They're very reluctant, thinking they may have shot something that would get them in trouble, not necessarily human, but, because of different game laws and things like that. Should we mention the drawing for the trip?
Still like to do our expedition in July and take a few of our listeners. And again, if you want to donate to that, $10 get your name in the hat. It's you can send money to BigfootHotspotRadio@gmail.com through PayPal, and then the amount you'd like to send. So yeah, on the as far as the drawing goes, we'd like to do the drawing and take some of our listeners out on an expedition here in the Pacific Northwest to a lot of these different areas and also possible burial sites. If you want to send, we're going to do it through a drawing, and we're doing it for $10 to get your name in the hat. The way to send money is through PayPal, and from that transaction, we can actually pull up your information and use it in the drawing. If you'd rather just send a donation, don't want to be a part of the expedition, that's okay too. Money's always welcome. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing the expedition.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun to take some listeners out and, get to see a few good, interesting things and have a good time.
Yeah, it'd be a blast. But who do we got? Who do we have coming up on the show, Will?
We have Dave.
Let's bring Dave on.
Hey, how you doing, Wes? I feel like I know you already, so you have to get to know me, but I've listened to everything you've done.
I think what we should do is just have you, tell us a little bit about your background and how you, grew up hunting and things like that. When you and I were first talking.
Right.
So listeners can get an idea of your background and your knowledge of the forest and animals and things, and then we'll just go from there.
I am a military brat. My father was a chief warrant officer in the military in charge of missiles, let's just put it that way. And I've been to every state in the United States except for 3. I've been to Alaska, Canada, and I've been overseas. I was in California when I was 5 and 6 years old. From there, we moved to Alaska, which I stayed in Alaska for 3.5 years. I believe I was just turning 10 when we left. From there, we moved to El Paso, Texas for 6 months, which was New Mexico. My father was on McGregor Range and White Sands Missile Range. We stayed there for 6 months, we actually went back down to Homestead. I'm originally from Homestead, Florida. My first encounter with anything close to a Bigfoot was probably in California, with the fact that there was a guy that used to take me on his motorcycle. Besides the MPs picking me up at 5 and 6 years old, I was always gone. My parents couldn't, back then you were allowed to play outside, and as soon as I got outside, I was in the woods somewhere, and then there it was hilly mountains, basically, I would guess you would say. Not a lot of trees, big trees, but where we were at, you could climb to the top of the southern hill behind the base, and you could see the bridge, the San Francisco Bridge. But on the other end, that's where it was a little more mountainous and trees over there, the bigger trees, which I believe they were some kind of pines. I'm not sure. I was very young. But we found the guy that took me on the motorcycle all the time, we found deer hanging in a tree. And I don't know exactly how many there were, but I would say 5 or 6. But they were hanging in the trees. They weren't hanging from the trees. Something had set them up in there, and they were laying over branches. And I would have to say possibly, maybe a cougar, maybe a squatch, don't know. That would be my first weird thing that I encountered. Next would be we moved to Alaska. Again, my father is from North Carolina, and you can take the country boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the country boy. He was in the woods every minute he wasn't working. We were in the woods, either hunting or fishing. I've been all over Seward, Homer, Brooks Range. We were up in Nome. I mean, we were just everywhere. And he was hunting from bear to mountain goat, doll, sheep, you name it. He was hunting it. But we also, that's where I learned to start trapping. And the big thing was to set snares for rabbits. You know, you have the snowshoe rabbit up there, which is a very good-sized rabbit. The first thing that I would say happened to us, there was 2 kids with me, and I don't remember their names at the time, but we were probably 8 years old, and we were in these 3 foxholes they had made where they were in the ground, and the only thing you could see sticking out of the ground basically was like, I would say it was a round, almost cylinder type of foxhole, almost a bunker, but no concrete.
Right.
And at the top, you would see, guesstimating because I was young, there was probably a 6 to 8 inch opening all the way around, except for there was a couple little spots where the dirt was on top. I believe there was plywood with dirt on top of it, because the door going into these was plywood. And it was probably a mile behind the elementary school, which those woods went all the way to the mountains from behind the school. You could go all the way to the mountains if you wanted to, which were probably 70 miles away if I had to guess. I don't know. I'd have to look on a map, but there was nothing but woods behind our schools, and that's where I stayed all the time. We were in these foxholes playing war or whatever it was. We had BB guns, and I seen something outside in one of the openings put what looked like to me a black, furry, hairy hand that was clenched like a fist down, and I seen something black. But by the time I had seen the fist go down, I thought it was a bear. But, you know, bears have claws. This looked like a fist. But it was hair coming off of it like a bear has hair coming off of its leg, similar to that. But it all happened so fast I never saw the face itself, or I just seen something black look like it was looking in, but we were already trying to scatter and get out of there. Never saw it. It never bothered us. I'm not sure what it was, but that would be my next encounter. After that would be, we set snare lines. You would set snares on the rabbits' trails. You could see it in the snow. And we would set them probably 20 to 30 feet apart in a line. And you might have 30 or 40 snares in this line, and you would walk that line the next day after you set them, pick your rabbits out. Well, occasionally we had these little weasels up there they called ermine that were white in the winter, and they were weasel color in the summer. Occasionally they would take your rabbit, you know, chew it up, chew it in half or something, maybe a lynx, or if the wolves found them or the bears found them, everything was gone. You couldn't put them down anymore. But this one time when I went to check them, there was something you have to understand a snare is a wire that hangs down with a small loop. And it's basically very thin wire. And as it gets tight, it won't come back loose, and it tightens around their neck and strangles them. They strangle themselves. It's pretty quick and humane, actually. But something had pulled, and I don't remember exactly how many rabbits there was, had pulled all the rabbits' heads by grabbing the wire and pulling on the rabbit. It would pinch the head off of the rabbit. Now, only a human or something with hands could do this. So there were no human tracks. There was actually, and I don't remember if it had snowed recently or what, but there was really no disturbance around them. You know, you have eagles will come in and they'll grab them once in a while, but then you might find a feather, but they scatter everything right there. They eat it right where they fly down on it, you know.
Right.
So something had plucked rabbits by holding the wire and pulling on them and popping their heads off.
I know it's years ago, but do you remember what your dad's comments were when he saw the rabbit's heads popped off?
I don't My dad was the kind of person that I was taught to not be afraid of anything. The only story my father ever told me was about he had seen the creature from the Black Lagoon when he was young, and him and a couple buddies had this little John boat with this 1-horsepower Sears and Roebuck motor on it, and they had a camp in North Carolina, and he was from Plymouth, North Carolina, and they were driving to their camp, and they were probably 14 years old, and a log had caught the motor. So every time he gunned it, it felt like something, it would start to go and then pull back on them. 1-horsepower motor isn't going to pull you. They thought the creature from the Black Lagoon had them. That's the only story my dad really ever told me as far as anything. He might have said something to the effect of, a wolf. It could have been, I don't remember exactly what it was. My dad was probably just cussing. So I don't know exactly. And remember, I'm still in the 9 years old.
Yeah. But
in the same breath, like I said, he was very military, very Army man, 100%, spit shine my boots at 5 o'clock in the morning before I go to work, son. Polish your belt buckle, make sure everything is spiffy. That's the kind of guy he was. I never heard him say anything really to the effect of anything while I was young until I got older. He did say one time, and I never knew what boogers were, but being from North Carolina, they call them boogers there. Probably the whole South called them boogers until somebody invented Bigfoot, and then, more educated people probably went to the Bigfoot, where the real hardcore Southerners, still call them boogers to this day. And I remember him saying one time, because they have military bases outside the military bases. It's an Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Delta, and then an E was something, I don't remember exactly what it was. And we would either drive or fly into them. My dad would take me in helicopters with him. You got to understand, in the military, everybody it's very camaraderie, kind of everybody, they would stick me on a cargo plane and fly me somewhere to visit a friend. You know what I mean? It was very buddy system,
yeah,
I guess you could say. Anyways, he never really said anything except for I asked him one time why there was such a tall fence. With the dogs, they had 2 fences, and the fence was probably 16 foot high around each one of these sites. And I asked him, why such a high fence, and he told me to keep the bears and boogers out. That's probably the only thing I remember him saying until I was older. Jump ahead to we went to Greece and we came back. I was 14 when we got back to the States. And we were we lived in Enterprise, Alabama, which is outside of Fort Rucker, Alabama. It's a helicopter base. But the woods there you can drive forever and you're on military land again. And, of course, we got there. Now I'm 14 years old. I've been hunting all over. I'm very seasoned in the woods. My encounter there was we were riding the roads. They would go to the Rod and Gun Club and stay out there late at night, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever they closed it. And we'd drive home. And I'd play games, out there and shoot pool and all of that. We're driving home, and my dad wants to take a deer on the way home for meat. And we ate everything we killed, just about, with the exception of what he did for the taxidermy from his friend's son. Other than that, my dad being country, and they were poor, he was very into eating animals. So I happened to shoot a deer on the side of the road on the way home. We were on military land. We're not far from the Rod and Gun Club, probably maybe 2 miles, 3 miles. My dad tells me to get out and wait for him to come back and go ahead and gut the deer. Well, at that time, I always carried a .45 pistol whenever I would go into the woods. We had military rounds, and I practiced with a .45 till I was blue in the face. But I put the pistol in my belt, jumped out, went over, pulled a deer into the woods and gutted it and waited for my father to come back. Well, probably an hour went by and my father didn't come back. And I hear cracking and crackling of branches, but not the normal down low branches, up higher. Kind of, you know, when something steps on branches or something snaps a branch, it's kind of a different sound. You know what I mean? It snaps a branch on the ground, you hear everything with it being snapped. When they snap something in the air, it's just a clean, crisp snap. Something was coming within maybe 20 yards of me. I couldn't see. I had no light. And it was snapping branches and making noises. And I couldn't imitate the noises, but they were hupping sounds, I want to say, maybe some kind of wolfing sound, I call it. I don't remember if I thought that they had bears in Alabama or not. I don't remember thinking about that. But I've been in it with bears in Alaska, and I was used to bears, and I never had bears come in and huff at me like that. They would huff when they ran away from you, maybe, but they never. I was never charged by any bears in Alaska, and I've seen hundreds of them. So I'm sitting here, and my dad is still not back, and this thing is, I want to say circling, but not quite circling, just hovering outside of where I could see anything, because it's dark, but you can see in the dark fairly well, if you know what I mean? But it was thick where he was at, so I could not see anything.
Yeah.
Apparently my dad had forgotten where I was and had been driving the wrong road looking for me, and when he came back by, you can bet that I was running out to that truck when I realized it was him, because he passed by me real slow, and I'm screaming, "Dad, Dad, Dad," because I had no idea what this is. So, mind you, that was my last encounter in Alabama, and I went to Florida to live with my mom and dad were getting a divorce. I was 15, turning 16. My mom and dad were getting a divorce, so I went to live with my friend in Florida who happened to be one of my dad's friend's son. And I went to stay with them because it was getting pretty hot and heavy with the divorce and all, you know, and I have a brother and a sister, and I didn't want to be a burden, and it was easier for me to do that. My mother, you know, thought it'd be best for me, so I went to Florida. We were hunting down in the Everglades, but on the east side of the Everglades, and back then it still isn't part of the park. But back then it was very few people went in there. And we started going in there snake hunting because we would snake hunt at night. And so we would snake hunt at night on these roads. We would hunt, you know, cats back in here. And we were there at night all the time. And I'm 16 years old. My friend's 17. We were driving down a road. They're coral rock roads, but they get washouts in them and sinkholes. And when you get stuck in these, there's no bottom. So whatever, if you don't have a four-wheel drive, and we actually were not in a four-wheel drive at the time, the right side of the truck fell into one of these sinkholes, which is like a sludge and limited slipper, and couldn't get it out. So we said, what the heck, let's dump the dogs here. We'll sit here, you know, and wait, and we'll go hunt on foot back there. So we're sitting on the tailgate. We had 4 of them with us. We let them out. They take off. They bail. They're probably gone, I'd say, 10 minutes. And again, remember, I'm on a coral rock white road. So you can drive at night without headlights on these things with no moon. They glow in the dark, basically. So you see things pretty well, especially any movement on them, as long as there's not trees hanging over them. And where we were, there was smaller vegetation. It wasn't the tall trees right where we were. And I hear the pitter-patter of feet. It sounded like many horses coming at us. And I thought, oh, my gosh, what's wrong? You know, what happened? Here come our 4 hounds doing faster than I ever seen them run in my life. Coming down this Coral Rock Road, I thought they were racing against each other. It was, at first, I didn't know what the heck the dogs were doing. I thought they were playing, but they never stopped until they hit that dog box in the back of the truck, and we could not get them out. They would not come out of the box. These are dogs that, you know, if they ran into a bear, they would, you know, chase the bear. They ran into cats, the panthers, they would chase the panthers. No problems. They're not going to run from any animals that I know of We could not get these dogs out of the box. Tails between their legs, whimpering in the back of the box. I got mad trying to snatch them out to get them to go do something because we're going to have to sit there anyways, you know. Could not get those dogs to hunt the rest of the night. Could not get them out of the dog box. Anyways, fast forward, we're out. It's probably 2:30 at night. We're driving out of there, and I see a set of red eyes in the headlights. I'm telling my friend's dad that these eyes are looking like they're up high and wide apart. The only thing that would have eye shine of red in that particular area was whippoorwills, and they're not very big, you know, and the eyes are close together, and we called them bull bats, but it's a whippoorwill as most everybody else knows them. That would have been the only thing that had red eye shine. Well, as we got closer, my eyes are trained on this, and I'm watching it, and I'm starting to see a slight outline. Basically, it looked like, have you ever seen how a kid will put their feet together at the bottom of a swing set and lean off of it with their arm holding it? That's what it looked like to me when all of a sudden it looked like it made one leap, touched the edge of the road, and then gone. So I'm telling my friend, you know, my friend's dad, I'm saying, you know, that had to be a bear. What else, you know, would be that high and the eyes like that far apart? When we pulled up to the tree where it was, I'm 5'11", and I'm pretty athletic. I couldn't jump up and touch the branch. That's how tall up the branch was. And I would say this thing's eyes were maybe a foot under it. So you're talking probably 8 foot, maybe 8 foot at the time, maybe a little higher. But I would say a good 8 foot. Now, I don't know if it was up the tree just a smidget or not, but like I said, the only thing that I could barely make out was the outline of something looked like it was kind of hanging off the tree. And then it jumped. It didn't run. It didn't skip. It just jumped or leaped, however you want to say it. And it looked like a shadow hit the road and gone. I'd gotten out with a shotgun in my hand, and my friend and my best friend's dad and my friend who tag along, we'll call him tag along, got out, and we started walking along the edge of the bank. And, you know, we're kind of whispering, kind of trying to say, you know, was it a bear or whatever, you know, trying to figure out exactly what was going on. And I seen something moving as we were moving, but I couldn't hear anything. And I was trying to get my friend's dad's attention, and I stopped walking, and they kept on walking, and he looked back at me, and I just kind of told him, you know, hold on. And I seen this shape start to basically move, kind of like crouch down. It looked like it was low to the ground. It was moving at the edge of these Brazilian peppers, but on our side. So my friend started walking again, and I was giving the old, you know, signal to stop him. And I was pointing the gun at this shape already, and I hollered, hey, is there anybody in there, you know? First thing I'm thinking, you know, maybe somebody's playing around with us or something. But it's 2:30 in the morning, and where we are, people don't go, you know. This is out in the South Everglades and the swamps. You know, back then, there wasn't people out there in the night very often, unless they were hunting with dogs for cats. There was a couple of guys we knew that did that like us. So I'm looking at this shape, and the more I stare at it, the more I realize that it's something crouched down. So I start stomping my foot at it, trying to get some kind of reaction out of it. And I took another step forward, and I stomped, and whatever it was started to come up and scream a blood-curdling scream at us. And I let 2 rounds go where I thought the head and the chest would be. And when I did that, it was, and I heard somebody else say this on your show before, so I know exactly what they're talking about. It was like there were 2 elephants in there tearing the trees apart. Couldn't see anything. The tree branches were just going ballistic. The next thing I know, I've seen this shape, and it's still shaking and moving, and I've seen the shape, and I let all 3 rounds go on it. I turned to tell my friend's dad and my buddy to run for the truck. They were already in the truck. That's how fast all this happened. I'm worried about them. Well, when it started to scream, it was ear-piercing, like I was having none of that, because now I'm thinking weird stuff, This was something full-on, why is it there? Why hasn't it left? And why isn't it, answering me or running or doing anything until I shot? Got in the truck. It had stopped on those 3 shots. Everything went calm instantly. I got in the truck. He was already starting to drive. He was peeling out once I got in there. Never been back to the road again in my life. And we've hunted all around that area. We never talked about it. We never mentioned it. I don't think that night on the way home, if there were 2 words said, I'd probably be lying, because I don't believe we ever talked about it after that, but we never went back to that road ever again. And I never saw anything like that particular thing again. As far as when I say the shape of it, it was almost like, a man in a ghillie suit with extra long hair and extra big was the outline of the shape crouched down. That would be how I could explain the shape that I saw in there. But when I let loose the first 2 rounds and it commenced to tearing down on those trees, I've never seen anything like that in my life, ever. Since then, never again. And like I said, I've hunted alligators, I've hunted wild hogs.
When you saw that one and you shot it, did you get a good look at it? I realize it sounds like it was in the middle of the night, so you didn't get a great look at it. But,
I only saw the shape. The shape was crouched down, and I couldn't tell it was until when I shot, I seen it come up, and the shape, I couldn't see it's black in there, he was all black, and the only thing I could see is because there's light on the other side of the trees, I kind of see an outline. I didn't really get a good look at any appendages, his legs. It looked like it was hairy, just lots of hair. And the only thing I've seen since then in a picture is a lady up the street from me in Sarasota sent a picture to 2 cops, to the cops up there. There's 2 pictures that she sent to the cops. Said that this thing's stealing apples off of her porch at night. Well, that's what it looked like, the shape of it. But that thing in that picture is crouched down. It's not standing up. It's behind palmettos. And you can look at the palmettos aren't, you could tell they're lower. They're not the big. When palmettos get tall, they get thick. And the branches, even the stems of them get thicker. And it was crouched down, whatever that. I did not get a good look at it there.
I gotcha.
Mind you, now we go to Georgia. I moved to Vidalia, Georgia. And I lived outside of Vidalia. Worked up there. The guy that I worked for had a big farm in Lyons, Georgia, and I took care of the cattle for him out there. And his everyday needs that a farm needs, I went there every day after work and took care of his farm. But I lived probably 20 miles outside of Vidalia in a place it's not even a city. It's called Normantown. Had one little convenience store that, on the corner, and I lived in a trailer way down in the creek bottom, and my nearest neighbor was probably a quarter mile to maybe even at that time a little further away from us. And my wife, I was talking to her the other day about this, and I come home from work one afternoon, and as I was walking into the trailer, there was this wailing sound. There was a pond about 200 yards from our trailer that came off of the creek. How a creek will have a pond, and then when it dries up, the pond stays there. But when the creek's high, it's part of the creek. There was a pond. It was probably 250 yards away from our trailer, and there was this loud moaning, crying, funny, weird noise. And I told my wife, hey, what the heck is that? And I had never heard it before. And, she didn't care nothing about it. She went back in the trailer. So I went and got a shotgun, and I walked over. And the whole time I'm listening to this, and I can say that I've listened to some things on the internet, and it wasn't quite that loud to me at the time. But it was a definite moaning, whining kind of sound. But there's nobody for miles on that side. It's all a big, long creek bed, you know, for 10 miles back there, nobody lived on it. And as I got over to the pond, there was nothing there, and it quit making the noise. And I scratched my head about it, and I went back, you know, to my wife. I was like, there's nothing over there. And I kind of shook it off, you know, as maybe it was a bird or, you know, who knows. I had no clue, but it never dawned on me, Bigfoot. You know, I never thought of it. But the more I heard sounds the other day, I was listening to some that just caught my attention. And I asked my wife, and she, you know, kind of, yeah, I remember, you know, kind of like she blows off the whole Bigfoot thing because she's, you know, from New York. So, mind you, I like to hunt railroad tracks. You know, in Georgia, we get all the blackberry bushes are on the railroad tracks, and I've killed a lot of deer walking across railroad tracks, you know. And I happened to be walking down there was a creek bridge, you know, on the railroad trestles for not car, but for the railroad to go over. There's a little creek bridge down there that I like to sit down because the deer would come down the edge of that creek sometimes, and, you know, I'd get some nice bucks coming through there. So it's probably just turning light as I'm walking down these railroad tracks, and my truck is probably maybe a half a mile from there, parked up on the little dirt road that I drove to get to the tracks on. And I see what I can only explain to you look to me like a giant chimpanzee on steroids come out of the edge of the bushes, you know, the vegetation, and it's about 250 yards from me, but I'm picturing it right now to be exactly like a giant chimp with huge arms. The legs, it reminded me of the way a golfer crouches is when it stopped at the top of the tracks, because as it was coming out, it was knuckle walking. It was on all fours, basically. And as it went up the little embankment, it kind of went up it, and as it got to the top, it stood up, and it stopped for a second, and it never saw me, I don't believe, because it didn't even really look my way. It just stopped for a second. And as it started down, it got down on all fours, down the other embankment and into the vegetation, and I turned around and I went back to my truck, and I didn't hunt there anymore. And that's the first, it looked like a giant chimp on steroids. The way it moved, the way its legs were going in when it stood up, like I said, it didn't get full. It was almost like it was 3/4 of the way standing up. I couldn't tell you how tall it was because I had nothing to pit it against. It was standing on the top of the railroad tracks.
I want to ask you, what did you think when you saw it? What was going through your head?
I realized then that, you know, that is what people are talking about, and what I had seen is real. I mean, there was nobody around. I was by myself, and as soon as it got into the vegetation, I turned around and chucked it right back to my truck and left, which my truck was a half mile. I had no encounter with it. It didn't chase me. It didn't come down there. I've been deep in the woods because we hog hunt down here, and we hog hunt at night, and we don't use lights, and I've done it for 10 years, and we used to do it every night with dogs, and the dogs wouldn't bark until they found a hog, but we would go for miles and miles. I've never had any of them come up and screw with me down here. I've never had them really screw me in Georgia that I could tell you. Now, I've had tons of experiences where things, you know, made loud cracks. I always write it off. If nothing comes up, I always wrote it off as, you know, a branch fell out of a tree and hit another branch. You know what I mean? Branches break in the woods all the time. Until I've seen that on the tracks and got the full visual, because what I shot in South Florida was a figure. It wasn't, I never got to see anything except for its shape and seeing what it did to the trees. This was the figure. I could see everything, you know, no face up close. Like I said, it was a good 250 yards from me, but I could see its arms, its legs, its back, you know, the whole side profile of it. And it looks like a 6 to 8 foot chimpanzee is what it looked like, full of hair, black as the ace of spades. Wow. And I have never had an encounter with one that scared me enough where, like your encounter, where I could see him for more than, you know, that when that thing started to scream, I started to shoot. And it had to be by itself because nothing else messed with us. But we were out of there instantly. I'm talking this all happened in as fast as I could pump those shells and realize it wasn't coming after me. I was in the truck and we were gone, you know?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that, you know, for all I know, it could be laying there to this day. The bones could be hanging in the tree where it was. I don't know. I've never been back there and never really thought about going back there until recently. You know, I've been reading all about the past 5 years. I've been looking at videos and listening to all these encounters and everything. And until I heard y'all show, I thought all of these people were just doing it to make money and hear themselves talk. But when I heard you guys talking about it and the seriousness of it, these things are animals. I guarantee you they're not the fairies in the woods that run around in tutus with Tinkerbells. That's for sure. But I do believe that they know what weapons are, and I do believe, you know, they avoid people at all costs if they can. I ran into panthers down here within 2 foot of me. They walked out on the trail while I was walking on it. They run from you, you know. The bears, they run from you. I've chased one up a tree, actually, one time. These things, you know, I could see them, what you guys are saying, where if they're anything to do with primates like I've seen that in Georgia, because it looks like a giant chimpanzee.
I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really enjoyed hearing you. I mean, I could sit and listen to you for the next 2 hours. But
yeah, we're going to have you on again, Dave.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's a great subject for people to get into because these things really do exist. I'm not a believer. I'm not a skeptic. I know that what I saw, and, you know, I've been in the woods all my life, and I believe a lot of hog hunters out there, you know, probably have some stories that they could tell in areas closer to where these things are thicker, you know, where there's a lot of them apparently in Arkansas and East Texas and Oklahoma and all those areas. Up in North Louisiana, they seem to be pretty thick up there. So those guys probably have some serious stories, I would imagine, because you hunt hogs at night.
Well, hopefully some of those guys will open up after hearing your stories. And thank you again for coming on. I really do appreciate it. I know Will does too.
Yeah, Dave, I do, buddy.
I really, my talk to Will was enlightening, shall I say. And if I hadn't heard Coombo on there, you know, because here's a aeronautic engineer that's not afraid to tell, you know, what he sees and hears, that made me figure, you know, what the heck, I'm not going to lose any face over it. So I know what I saw, and nobody's going to change my mind.
Is a longtime listener, and he wanted to come on the show to share his encounter.
Hi, Rustin. How are you this evening?
Okay.
So you tell us about this encounter you had.
Okay, well, actually, there's two. It was both in the same school year.
Okay.
First one was during hunting season. The other one was on a hiking trip. The first one, there was this area is not very big at all that I was hunting in. And there's this trail that I went up in on. Everything went fine. About 2:30-ish, I noticed that it was getting a little bit dark. I decided to head out. And so I'm walking out, and I tripped over a deer skull and noticed that it appeared that the neck was snapped. And I started looking around, and I discovered like 3 or 4 others decided to leave. And on the way out, I noticed something was pacing beside me. Being 18, I didn't think much of it. I knew I had a gun. I wasn't worried about it. Well, every time I had to stop, it would stop. So I stepped off into the woods where it was and identified myself, told them what I had on me, and I looked over to my left and on my right, and I literally noticed a branch being bent back and got nailed in the head with it and knocked out. Well, my parents, I guess, are called game wardens and all that stuff. When I come to, I was sitting next to a game warden, and I noticed over in the snow a little bit, they were kind of taking their feet and like scrubbing the ground with it and all that stuff, like they're trying to hide something. Couldn't figure out what they were trying to hide. Later on that night, I kept on having these like dreams of this face. And it was all hair covered, brow ridges, the whole 9 yards. And I just didn't know. I still have it to this day. I don't know if it's something I dreamed up or I'd come to when I got knocked out, and the fear of it just knocked me back out. I don't know. I literally didn't know what to make of that one.
Huh, interesting. So you were walking towards it, and it swung the branch back at you and hit you in the face?
Yeah, I mean, it knocked me out. By the time they found me, it was midnight. I mean, this thing could have done anything to me. Why it didn't, I don't know.
What did you think? I mean, looking back, what do you think?
I don't think that what I dreamed about that night was a dream. I think that I actually had come to, and either the pain or the fear of this thing knocked me back out. I don't think that it was a dream.
The forestry workers, they were getting rid of tracks when you woke up?
That's what it appeared to be to me. Because I had a female game warden kind of sit in front of me like she's trying to block something. But I could still see them. They're moving their feet around and all that shit in the snow. Like they were trying to get rid of something.
Well, that's interesting. We've known of things like that have happened before.
But they erased they got rid of the report. I went back in a couple of days later, got spoke to, really rude, by what were supposedly game wardens. Told basically that if I ever open my mouth again, that they're going to ruin my reputation on my fire department, and they're going to ruin my reputation in my town. When I asked my friend who they were, he didn't know. Not a clue. He checked them in their database, couldn't find them.
What happened on your second encounter?
Second encounter was a school function. It was a little hiking club we had. And we went up Mount Katahdin, which is the beginning of the Appalachian Trail, Maine. Coming down, I decided to take a rest. Still had a group behind me, had a group up in front of me. So I didn't think nothing of it, and I just went down. Well, going down the mountain, you know you're going a lot faster than when you're going up. And what happened is I misjudged it. Walked off on a game trail. Didn't make nothing of it. And I found a cave. And it was already getting dark, and I have no vision at night. None. So I decided I'm going to have to stay here in the cave. My grandfather had always taught me that there's nothing in the Maine woods that's going to hurt you. Which, for the most part, I believe is true. I mean, the bears will run from you, deer will run from you, moose will run from you, whatever. In this little cave up above is like a hole, maybe the size, I can't estimate how, there's a hole you could look up through and all that stuff. What had happened that night was I was sleeping. I was sleeping pretty good, being out there in the middle of nowhere. Wasn't all that scared. And I drifted off sleep. Don't know what time it was. But I kept on feeling something from up above hitting me in the face. Not hitting me, but slapping me. At first I thought it was a branch or something like that. But when all I had on me was a buck knife. So I intended on cutting the branch down, thinking it was a branch. So I reached out to grab a hold of it, and I grabbed a hold of fur. And it was like, I put my hand around it, and I just couldn't do it. And I started moving my hand up and down, but when I got down to what I thought was going to be a paw, it wasn't a paw. It was a hand. I started feeling all around it. I backed up in the cave, away from this hand, and it was like everything in my head wanted to run out that cave screaming. It was like I had everything in my head just telling me, if you go out, you're dead.
So it was slapping you in the face then?
Yeah, it was slapping me in the face from this hole up above.
Huh.
I think what had happened was when I was walking around just trying to get my bearings before I went into the cave to retire for the night, when it started getting dark, I think it had figured out there was something wrong with me. And it decided that it was going to use one of those tactics to try to scare the hell out of me, to get me outside the cave, and then do what they wanted to do.
What did you think they wanted to do?
I think they wanted me to run out of the cave, and I got the feeling that he wasn't alone. Something just told me on each side of this cave there was something waiting for me.
Did you get a sense they were violent, or?
With him hitting me in the face, it was almost like I don't really know how to explain. All I can think of was like he was trying to test me to see how I would react. But then again, I also get a sense of, like I said before, he wanted me to leave out of the cave. Whether that was his home, or whether that he wanted me to go there and that was a great big trap. I don't know. I wish I'd had camera on both of them. I really do. But I just didn't think to bring them.
When you were finally able to leave the cave, did you see anything around there, any sort of signs or anything?
Well, what had happened was I ended up crawling up for the rest of the night in the back of this cave. National Guardsmen found me the next morning because they sent out a search party and all that stuff. And they found me, and I could hear them coming. They did not identify themselves until they were basically on top of me. So I could hear these things coming, and I didn't know it was humans. I'm freaking out. Just do it. Get it over with. Do it. End it. And the National Guard. And I get out. I looked around. And the time of year it was, I didn't see any evidence. I got up on top of the cave, looked around. It was nothing but pure rock. I looked all around, didn't see nothing. And we had to get out onto the trail, we had to go through probably about a half mile worth of thickets. And going through those thickets, I was scared out of my mind.
Huh. That's a crazy encounter.
Yeah.
How long was it slapping you in the face for?
It did it probably about 4 or 5 times. Like I said, the first time it did it, I just passed it off as a branch. Maybe a tree fell down or something, whatever. I mean, I wasn't thinking. I mean, just, you know how it is when you're first getting up, you're not thinking.
Sure.
Right.
Just reacting.
Right.
But when it kept on doing it, I was just getting fed up with it. So I decided, like I said, I'm going to cut it down.
Yeah.
But when I grabbed a hold of that, I was like, well, what the hell? When I got down to his hand, it was like, okay, this ain't no paw. What the hell is this thing?
Not a situation I'd want to be in.
No, I don't think I'd want to be in it either.
But,
well, do you have any further questions for is it Rustin? Is that what you go by? Rustin?
Rusty.
Yeah, no, sure, appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you for sharing your encounter.
Right, we sure appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Well, I want to thank everyone for listening tonight. Another Sunday down. Thanks, Will. I appreciate being here.
It's a great show, great guest. Hope everybody